Talk Radio. You're in to all things music.
Welcome to Intersect Radio, where music, faith, and life converge. With your host, Aaron the A-Train Smith.
Chihuahua. Welcome everybody to Intersect Radio. Oh yeah, it's another beautiful Tuesday here in Nashville. And once again, I thank you all for listening in, taking the time out of your day to hang with us. My guest today is the one and only Tim Calhoun. That guitar solo, you know, Tim was playing that solo and looking at Carlos Santana and going, what? Bring it. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That was great, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah.
Tim is a professional guitarist here in Nashville and is also an adjunct professor at Trevecca Nazarene University. So,
Indeed.
you know, if you want your kids or if you want to learn how to play guitar, you got to come to Trevecca.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's it's a great program, particularly in the rhythm section world. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Tim is also very much recorded and has recorded guitarist and has played live with a lot of famous people.
Yeah, I've been fortunate, and over the last 30 years now, I guess.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about, really.
Yeah, some of those people are Jo Dee Messina, Trisha Yearwood, Kathy Trocolli, Mylon Lefevre, Ronnie McDowell, Bo Didley, The Temptations, Phil Keggy. Now, you know, if Phil Keggy calls another guitar player to play with him, there's something going on there. Yes.
Yeah, well, it was a great concert that night, and it was anytime you can trade solos with the incredible Phil Keggy is a wonderful treat.
Yes. Well, thank you for coming, Tim.
Man, thanks for having me.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for coming over. It's I'm looking forward to a great conversation here. And so let's kick it off. You were born in Pennsylvania, right? Yeah,
born in Pennsylvania, and kind of was there, and then had moved to South Florida for a while, and then then back to Pennsylvania to finish high school, and then back to Florida to school. So,
what did you? So you went to South Florida before you graduated high school?
Yeah. So, my parents, divorced when I was pretty young, and I had two sisters, and they were both living in South Florida. So after my parents had called it quits, my mother, I guess, needed her baby girls as well, and so she took me to Florida for a while. Yeah.
Did you hear about the school there when you were there?
No, I didn't. Those were very tumultuous years after that the divorce. So I went to like 14 schools in a 4-year period, and
wow.
And it was very hectic. And then But then, I ended up moving back home with my father when I turned 13, which was where I was born and raised in Everett, Pennsylvania. Yeah, middle of nowhere kind of place, but yeah.
And when did you start playing guitar?
My sister on my 13th birthday bought me my first guitar, and technically not my first guitar, but the first guitar that I actually learned, the very first one was destroyed in the tumultuous years that I was referring to.
Did you break it over somebody's head or something?
It's really funny that you said that, but yes, I did. My mother married very poorly, and he was a retired sergeant detective out of Washington D.C. who was an alcoholic and was, beating her really badly, and so
you actually broke your
that
guitar
that is exactly what happened to that guitar. Yes.
Oh my.
Yes. It was crazy that you, I know. It was like, what are the odds that he said that?
I was, what comes to mind, I was reading Astral Weeks. It's a book about Van Morrison's time in Boston.
Oh, yeah.
And he got mixed up with the mob. And so the guy who wrote the book was interviewing the mobster.
Oh, wow.
And the mobster said, I haven't seen that fella since I broke his guitar over his head.
Evidently, it serves that purpose too.
It's a good weapon.
Yeah.
You get hit with a guitar, you start thinking differently.
Maybe you should do something other than what you're doing at the moment.
Right.
But my sister bought me a guitar. She's actually a musician as well. She's an organist and has made a living playing music all her life and as well.
She's still in Florida?
She is. She was in Manhattan for 18 years, but after being in Florida for a while, she was in Manhattan for a long time, and then recently, maybe 10 years ago, moved back to South Florida.
Mm-hmm. So you get your second guitar at 13.
Yep. Yeah.
And then you decide to use it as a musical instrument.
Yeah, I actually learned to play at this time. I had a brother-in-law who played, and I think like so many guitar players, my brother-in-law showed me, a bunch of chords, bar chords, and the blues scale, and then I was just off and running, and it was it was just every evening I was picking up a needle off of the record and learning song after song that way. And
really?
That's really how I started to play, just completely by ear. And that was like every evening. That's what I did. I poured myself into playing guitar.
I've often wondered how guitarists do that, because how many octaves do you have on the guitar?
Well, if you have 24 frets, it would be 6.
6.
Okay. Yeah. Well, still, even 22 frets, you can bend that high D up to an E. So,
okay. So you're learning bar chords, and so you plop the needle down on the record.
Yeah.
You figure out what key the song is in.
Right? Yes.
Okay. And you start from there.
Yeah. And it was, I just, would find the note. Sometimes I would work with just the verse and just keep working it. And it really helped that, in my 13, 14 formative years there, when I was 13, 14 years old, I was listening to this band called Kiss.
Wow.
So, if you knew your bar chords, if you knew your bar chords and your blues scale, you could figure out anything that they ever did, really. Yeah. So, and that until I got bored, and then I went on to, Rush and a lot of other bands and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Other bar chord bands.
Other bar chord bands, yes. Yeah. And then, of course, Eddie Van Halen came out, and that was crazy. Yeah. Trying to figure that stuff out. That was a whole other challenge there. Yeah.
So, okay. So you kind of buckle down on the guitar. Was the guitar like a respite or an escape for you, or a comfort sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely was. It was a way to kind of soothe the inner beast as it was. After all that craziness in the family, I had a chip on my shoulder, I guess, but yeah, I mean, it was an escape for sure, and it's interesting to think about it. At being 52 years old. One of the wonderful things about being that old is you can look back in your life and you can see how God has had a hand in your life the whole way through.
He uses tragedy and disruption and all that sort of stuff to point you in the way you should go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I always say, that God gave me the guitar, it was my transcendent cause for the longest time until I really understood what my transcendent cause was. Mm-hmm. But he gave it to me to, as an instrument to help, and to get me through
an
stuff.
Instrument.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I'm reading in your bio that you got really good by the time you were 16.
Yeah, well, I played a lot, like I said, and almost all by ear. And when I was 16, I had heard about this band. I had already known about them, but they played. I don't know if you remember, but like the show band circuit. Do you remember this weird phenomenon?
Yeah.
So I just learned to drive. Just got my car, and I got an audition with these guys, and they needed a guitar player, and I went, and I got the gig, and it was great. So you'd play. First 2 hours was like what, pop top 40 music, pop music. And then there was some kind of routine. They did a Elvis routine, a Blues Brothers routine, just that kind of stuff. And, and I did that the last 2 years of high school. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I did a similar thing my last 2 years of high school. We had an instrumental set, and then the guitar player would sing like Joe Tex. And then we had this other singer who would come out, and he would do like Jerry Butler stuff. And then he would, then I actually sang with him. We did a Sam and Dave show.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then
I didn't even know you. See, I just learned something about you today. I didn't know you sang.
Then we had this lady who did all the female R&B tunes. And then I sang with her, and we did a Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell thing. And then our keyboard player, who was a star,
he
closed the night.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm intrigued now. I got to hear you sing now.
No, you don't. We don't need to go there.
Oh, man.
But did you miss your graduation because you were out playing?
I almost didn't graduate, because we kind of played in Pennsylvania and Maryland, and sometimes as far away as Philly. So, I missed so many days of school that,
really?
And again, looking back at it, I had so many people pulling for me, and God had so many people placed in my life. My principal, basically, I guess he fudged the numbers, because I think I missed like 42 days of school or something like that my senior year. It was a ton.
42 out of 48.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But it was a lot, and technically I should not have been able to graduate. And so it was. But he made it happen somehow.
How long did you stick around after you graduated?
My 11th grade year, I have a sister who called me and, said, Tim, what are you going to do with your life? And, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and I had never thought of it. She said, well, I'll call you back in a couple days, and I want to know what you want to do, and so, she called back, and I said, well, I thought about going into the Air Force. I always kind of wanted to fly, but ultimately I just told her, I said, the only thing I'm, kind of good at is music and playing guitar. I would really like to give that a shot. And so she said, all right, I'll call you back next week. I want you to tell me 5 universities where you'd like to go study. And so it was a really interesting week because, as I was thinking about, I'd never thought about going to school. And, but as I was, figuring out another solo or whatever, and like I had been doing the thought of going to school intrigued me mostly because, I would figure out a solo, and then there would be a note in the solo that would just slay me, that it would just hit my heart. And I'm like, why does this, I know it's an F sharp or whatever it was, but why does that move me so much? And so then the idea of going to school became really, really attractive, and so, and then the other thing that happened that week is I had, of course, like every guitar player, had a subscription to Guitar Player magazine, and there was a guy on the cover named Steve Morse of the Dixie Dregs, and in that article he talked about how he went to University of Miami and how hard he had to practice to keep up with all the great guitar players there, and that was it. When he said that, I'm like, if this dude had to work like that, that's where I want to go. So that was my first choice, and I checked out Shenandoah Conservatory in Berkeley and the usual suspects and that kind of stuff. But that was my goal at that point. And of course, I hadn't taken any guitar lessons really. Didn't know anything.
Really?
No.
Did you have to audition?
Yeah. So what I did, of course, this was my junior year. So, in high school. So, I said, well, I better find somebody to study with, and so there was, I grew up about 2 hours east of Pittsburgh, and, there was a town, called Johnstown, and one of the adjunct professors, at, Carnegie Mellon, Duquesne University taught out of this store in the weekends. And so somehow I hooked up with him and I started, taking lessons and learning to read notated music. And at the same time I met up with my band director and asked her if we could, study theory and that kind of stuff. So I tried to start preparing myself. But ultimately, we auditioned by cassette tape back then. I made a cassette tape and sent it in and hadn't heard back from them. And but I went to Florida to visit my sister over Thanksgiving and thought I'd run down to the school. It was still in session. And so I met the professor there, and he said, "Do you have a guitar?" I go, "No." He goes, "Well, let's do your audition. I have an extra one in my office." So that totally freaked me out. And so he yanked me into his office, and What was that like, the audition? What did you have to do? It was terrifying. So like I said, I had already, did the cassette thing. So I had learned a jazz blues, and then I learned a bossa nova, and, I could kind of solo over it. I really didn't know what I was doing. Like the bossa nova was meditation. I go, well, I can kind of run a C scale here, but then this chord, man, this note sounds, I got to go to the C sharp here or whatever. And, I just, yes, exactly. Of course, I knew nothing about modes or any of that kind of stuff at that point, but, I could dumb my way through it and just, and it went okay. Good enough that, and I got in, so yeah. So when you started studying modes and stuff, you probably figured out why that F sharp was where it was. Yes, it turns out that I love Aeolian, Dorian, and more than anything Lydian. Those colors just I love those colors. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And Lydian dominant, like, what about Mixolydian? Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with playing over a 5 chord, yeah. Cool. Yep.
So you graduate from high school, you go to Florida.
Yeah.
And what was it like when you started?
It was crazy. I really, well, you're young and full of testosterone, and I really, I felt that I was a really good guitar player. And of course, in the area where I grew up, I guess I kind of was. But then I got there, and the talent at that school was exactly as Steve Morse had said. And I'll never forget. There's a guitar player named Andy Timmons that is a pretty big name among guitar players, and he was a couple years older than me. But I'll never forget the first week there. He was in the Funk Fusion ensemble, and he was just a monster player then. And man, just watching him, I couldn't believe that. Okay, that's a student. Oh my goodness, what about?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and so and there was a lot of those upperclassmen were just playing their behinds off, and
You know where any of those guys are now?
Yeah, the one guy, Brian Monroney, he was with Tom Jones for a long time, and he was the leader of the band and did that gig for a long time. And I don't know if he's back in Colorado or not, but Andy is still playing, and then I think he lives in Texas now. So, and then a lot of my guys I went to school with, I work with here in Nashville.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Kelly Cox, you might know her, piano player.
Yes.
Yeah, I work with her a good bit. Great piano player.
You guys went to the same school, eh?
Yeah, we went to school together. Sure did. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah,
that's right. She teaches over at Trevecca as well.
She does, yeah, and there's some saxophone players in town that went there, and it was an engineer. I don't know, Dan Rudin. I don't know if you know him, but he's an engineer here in town that I went to school with, and he was kind of instrumental when I got here. He kind of helped plug me in.
So how long did it take before you started?
Playing?
Yeah.
Man, it happened really, really quickly. I got here in just after Thanksgiving in '97, and I went
at school.
Oh, at school. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Nashville. I have to admit, I really didn't know what jazz was. I mean, where I grew up, it's still to this day, you have to drive an hour to go see a movie. So I thought Steve Morse was jazz. I really had no idea. And I was thrown in this thing called swing class, and everybody had this thing called a real book. I had never seen a real book, had no idea, didn't know what swing. I really didn't. I was so backward in a lot of ways. And it was like being thrown in the deep end and go. But I stuck with it, and it started to all make sense. And, probably the end of my sophomore year, I started to, my professors started recommending me for stuff out of school, and so did upperclassmen, and I landed this incredible gig. It was a house band, kind of, at this place called Charcoals, which was one of the best, bigger clubs in Miami. And I played 5 nights a week, 10 till 2. Yeah, 10 till 2, Tuesday through Saturday, my junior and senior year, all through. And it was great because it was, it was a horn section that came in at midnight, and so we got to play all that, Tower of Power, and it was all Miami guys, and but it was great band, and I was really, really lucky, and got to do my first session down there. It was at Criteria Studios. It was a Tropicana orange juice commercial.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's good.
But I was just so blown away by going to Criteria. Bee Gees built it, and kind of legendary studio down there, and that was cool. Yeah,
that's great,
so,
man.
Yeah.
So let's halt for a minute, and so where in this in this time period from being 13 and really getting into guitar, and then being at the University of Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Your relationship with Christ, was that? Did that happen somewhere in that time period, or was it?
It happened my sophomore year in college. There was a church called Jesus Student Fellowship that I went to. I mean, and before that, if you would ask me, I believed in God. I grew up in the Church of God, a Pentecostal, and so. But then I got, born again, and it was radically different. And that the crazy thing was I didn't know what to do with it, being a musician. There was I auditioned that year for this place called Penrod's, which was up in Fort Lauderdale Strip. And those years, that was like the place for spring break. Like it was bedlam. It was just crazy. And Penrod's was a great club, and it's 5 nights a week. I think it paid like $450 a week or whatever, which was great money in 1986 or 5 or whatever it was. But I ended up walking away from it because I didn't know what to do with my, me being born again, and then I really didn't. At that point, I was like going, I don't know if I should play music or not. It really messed with my head, and and so I took that summer and I didn't play anywhere, even though I could have had that gig. Yeah.
So what was that experience like? I mean, what was the revelation like?
Well, it dawned on me at some point that all music is a gift from God. I believe, and some don't know it, but I believe it's all a gift from God, and I decided that if I was strong enough, again, trying to be Christ-like, Christ didn't hide, right? He didn't, stow away somewhere. So I decided that if I could be strong enough, and not, do things that I shouldn't do, then maybe I could be a beacon, in, whether I'm playing in clubs or on the road or whatever. And sooner or later, I figured, people will see that there's something different about Tim, and perhaps that will open up a conversation, and maybe they need to talk to somebody. And so that is really what changed for me, and said, okay, I can do this. And it definitely proved to be the case. Many times I've been able to, witness and, tell people about, the wonderful gift. And so, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Glad you're stuck in there.
Yeah,
but
me
it
too.
takes some time to figure it out.
Yes, it sure did. It sure did, yeah. It sure did.
Because it can be very challenging,
Yeah.
I remember that time period. But I was fortunate enough to become a believer amongst believers.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I was the odd man out, until I got saved, and then it's like I was part of the group, So it wasn't that much of a struggle. I still played in clubs and stuff like that, but usually there was another believer around.
That's really good. I that was not my experience. Most of the time it seemed to be I was the only believer. The band that I was telling you about, that I had the house gig there my junior and senior year, I was the only believer, and then the years that when after I left Miami, I just never, until I moved to Nashville, I kind of was always felt like the one, the weird guy. Yeah.
So where did you go after Miami?
I went to the New York area, went into Manhattan, and Well, I had done some tours and that kind of stuff, and and then I came back and I was playing in clubs again, and I'm like going, man, and I remember, I don't know if you know, but this guy was sitting in, his name's Ed Kaye. He's just a monstrous saxophone player, and I just remember playing a gig, and the band all was really, really good, and Ed took this, artistic genius solo, and I just remember looking around and nobody was listening, and it was so heartbreaking because I was like going, you have no idea what just happened here. That was just unbelievable. And so I was ready for a change, and I thought maybe going to New York would help do that. I had found out about a gig up there, and I had several friends that were in the New York area that from school and was there, and it turned out to be the right thing to do, because I was able to actually do a lot of work on the weekends doing tuxedo gigs and that kind of stuff, and just that. I mean, there was many weekends we would do 5 gigs on a weekend. Friday night, really? 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. Yeah, it was a very, very busy band, and which that freed the rest of my week up for writing and everything else I wanted to do, artistically, and it was good.
Where'd you live in New York?
Well, was in the Village for a while, and then of course being from Pennsylvania and being such a farm boy, it was even more so than Miami. It was kind of culture shock. So we moved right across the border into Pennsylvania ultimately, and I drove it. Yeah, I was putting like 60,000 miles a year on my vehicle, which was tough. But the good side of that was I was doing a ton of listening. Because that, I was in the car so much. Yeah, exactly. So it turned out to be a good thing, and ultimately, and so.
Were you married during this time?
Yeah, I got married at 23 years old. So we just had our 30th anniversary, and yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, she has stuck with me, and I am unworthy. Yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
Man, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So how long did you hang out in New York in the Big Apple?
I was there from 91 to 97. So, yeah, 6 years or whatever. And, when I was up there, I started doing more session work and a lot of stuff for like media and that kind of stuff. I had met the folks at Turner Broadcasting, and I started actually writing, jingles and that kind of stuff. And so Bill, I wrote stuff for Cartoon Network and just all kinds of stuff. And I started, doing that kind of stuff and doing a lot of sessions in that world, and which was great. And that's actually how I got to Nashville the first time.
Doing a commercial or something?
Well, Turner would come to New York there for a while and record, and then I guess Bill kind of figured out that Nashville was their office was in Atlanta, their headquarters or whatever, and they figured out that there was amazing musicians in Nashville, and of course a lot of that stuff for CNN and headline news and all that stuff is all real strings and real horns and all that stuff, and it was way cheaper to do that in Nashville. And so, I came down during one of those sessions, and, we all went out to breakfast one morning, and I called my wife, and I said, you won't believe Nashville, but if, 20 minutes outside of Nashville looks like where we grew up, and because she grew up where I grew up, and we've known each other since, I don't know, man, her father was my flag football coach when I was, when I was like 7 years old.
Was she like a cheerleader?
She was a cheerleader.
Oh man.
She totally was a cheerleader. Yes. Yep.
So I'm 2 for 2.
I don't know how you're doing this.
You broke your guitar over your dad's head.
Stepfather, yes,
head.
please, yeah.
And your wife was a cheerleader for the Little League flag team you played on?
Well, she wasn't she was in high school. Yeah.
Okay.
But she ultimately was. Yes. We were both, our flag team was called the Packers, and yes. And, her dad, we still talk about it even today.
Does he still live up there?
He does. Yeah. And my dad, who just recently passed, lived there all his life. And yeah, I would have been, I guess I was 5th generation in that town of Calhouns. Yeah. So
Calhoun.
Yes, Calhoun actually, but yes,
Calhoun.
Yes,
That's right.
Noel.
You're a Scottish thing,
yes,
right? And you went over to Scotland and they taught you how to pronounce your name.
Yes, it was a wonderful trip.
Calhoun.
Calhoun.
What's this Calhoun stuff you're talking, young
There's
man?
Noel.
It's Calhoun.
Yep.
Did you get a family crest?
Yeah. There's a crest, and there's a night back there. My son did the whole thing when he was in high school. My older son, and he got back to like 1100. Yeah, and the Calhoun name, and so there's like 8 or 9 generations here in the United States, 4 in Ireland, and then everything else was in Scotland. And so 2 summers ago, we did that trip. We went into Ireland, and then we went and it's crazy. The house in Ireland, where those 4 generations, still remains, and we were able to see it, and which was really it was really pretty. It's a golf course now, but yeah, it's pretty neat.
Wow.
But so that house is on the golf course.
So, what was your first big gig here in Nashville?
Well, so when I first got to town, I went to a New Year's party, and at this engineer friend of mine who I went to school with, and I met this guy named Sam Levine, who's a contractor and player here in town, and he just happened to need a guitar player, and it was crazy. And our first gig was at the state capitol, and Olivia Newton-John sang, and Ronnie Millsap, and everybody who was anybody was at this, because she had just did I think it was called Country Girl. She was trying to do a country album. She did a country album, and so that it was crazy. And I at that point I thought like all the gigs that's what Sam did, and so that got me started. And I'll never forget the drummer on that. I had listened to this CD before I had moved to town called the Nashville Cats. And so I had met the drummer, and he shakes my hand, and he says, "Hey, I'm Bob Mader," and of course he played on that, and I go, "Oh my goodness,"
I have a ride.
Yeah. And Bob and I became really good friends, and
Didn't Sam have the big? He did all the parties here in town, right?
He did, yeah, and I worked with him, for a lot of years, and did all kinds of stuff, and he introduced me to all kinds of people, and had helped me to do session work, and then plus also I called my professor in Miami after I moved here and said, like, who do we know in Nashville? And that's how I was able to find people and also get plugged in. That was a really big help. There was a country music star named Laurie White, who I sat next to in ear training, and she was a pretty big country star.
Really?
And so I called her too, and she said, "Yeah, call this guy and this guy and this guy," so I was working, just several weeks after getting here. I was fortunate enough to start paying bills.
So this is around 97, 98?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yep.
That's great. So,
I'll never. I never knew what the number system was, of course. So
okay.
Because
you had been reading music.
Yeah, exactly. You don't see that in New York, and so my very first session in town was pretty pretty interesting. So do you remember Tommy Wells by any chance?
Yeah.
So Tommy was on this session, and we were making our own charts. So we were in the control room, and and I asked, what key is it in, and probably D. And so I'm writing everything out in D or whatever. And I look over at Tommy, and Tommy was writing all ones because he doesn't care what key it is. He just wants to know the form, right? And I go, what in the world? And so I get up and I go over and sit next to the keyboard player, and then I see him writing, 1645 or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. And I go, and of course, if you're schooled, it doesn't, it becomes pretty apparent what this is. And so I started writing numbers too. And then they started with all the different, terms like push and, diamond and all the things, all the Nashville things. And I had no idea what any of that was. And then the guy who was running the session said, "Hey, Tim, you have the opening lick." And now, in New York, normally if, we were doing a demo of a song or cutting a song, normally they would hand you a piece of paper with something that they wanted,
Yeah.
And of course that was not the case here, just, whatever you, make it up. Yeah. And so we get into the room and, and I kind of quickly work up an intro and we read it down. And, of course, as soon as we're done, Tommy stands up and says, "I'm good." And and I go, "Oh, really?" So completely opposite of Manhattan. Everything goes really, really fast in Manhattan, unless you're in a recording studio, and doesn't move nearly as fast as Nashville does. And so, we did like 10 tunes in like, I don't know, 3 hours or something like that with the overdubs. And it was, typical demo session here in Nashville. Yeah.
For those of you listening who don't know Tommy Wells, he was a really great drummer here in Nashville. Did tons of studio work. I mean, he was the guy, And
sweetheart.
Unfortunately, he passed way too soon, about 5 years ago.
That's about right, yeah. Yeah, big hockey fan, and his son plays hockey. Yeah.
Man. So what you got coming up?
I play these musicals too, and so
I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Now, I went to Berkeley for a little bit, and at Berkeley, you always had people coming through there looking for musicians to go out on the road. Did that same thing happen at Miami?
Yeah, I guess so. It was kind of interesting. I remember the one drummer left to go play with Aha, and there was guys being pulled out of there, and of course, that school, like everybody in Gloria Stefan's band was out of that school, and the bass player was actually one of my professors. Her drummer I played in bands with him all the time, and he was my roommate for the last 2 years in college. And her guitar player, John DeFar, who wrote "Get On Your Feet," was, me and him, we subbed back and forth. And so there was all kinds of stuff going on. It was crazy, but there was some of that, probably not as much as in Berkeley. I don't know.
Did you have like a bulletin board and people would
No, it was all word of mouth. Okay. Yeah. It was pretty much just word of mouth, and
that's the way it was at Berkeley too, mostly word of mouth. Yeah,
my first session, over at Tropical anyway, really came about because some guy, I can't even remember his name now, saw me playing at a club, and just asked me to come play on stuff, and that I was busy over there for quite a while. Every week doing something over there. Tropical recording studio. Yeah. No, that was a different thing. So Tropical, that was a recording studio, and I think the Tropicana thing, one of the professors gave my name out because he was playing on it or something. I can't quite remember, but yeah.
So Do you do a lot of studio work now? I know you have a studio at home.
Yeah, I'll do overdubs at the house like everybody else, and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's not like it was like 2010ish. I think it seems like everybody I talk to, it's not near as much recording going on. I think I remember reading an article in the Tennessean that the writers that were on staff was like down 80%, and so that's huge. And I was doing a lot of EPs, and A&R departments don't seem to be a thing, and so there's not as much demos being cut. I don't think in Nashville either, but yeah, I'm doing something all the time, and trying to keep that going. Yeah.
When did you start at Trevecca?
This would be 4 years. Yeah, so 4 years ago, I guess it would have been. Yeah. And it's been really interesting. I never thought I would teach. I always it just was never anything that I had thought about doing. But a friend of mine took over the guitar and bass department over there, and I've worked with him for 20 plus years, and he's just a fantastic musician. And so when he took it over, part of me really wanted to help him. He had asked me to do it when he first took it over, and then I just wasn't in a place to do it. And then he asked me again 4 years ago, and I just really thought I could help him, with the guitar part of it, and because he teaches bass over there. And
okay, what's the program?
It's commercial music.
You write your own curriculum?
I did. It was kind of crazy. I looked at the curriculum that was there, and I, for me, I really wanted to make the curriculum so that if you got a piece of paper and left after 4 years, that you had all the skill to go and make a living playing guitar, right? And I always thought University of Miami totally did that for me. I've never been in a situation where I felt like I was over my head, right? And so, so basically, I patterned what I'm doing now at what University of Miami did the best I could. It's a liberal arts degree, so they have stuff that we did in the University of Miami, being just a pure, performance degree. So, but yeah, it's, so I changed the curriculum drastically, and it's been good. My guys that are graduating, the one guy who's graduating next semester already has a gig waiting for him, and the guys who are graduated recently are out there doing it. They're out there playing, and so yeah, it's exciting actually. Yeah.
How many students you have?
I only have 7 right now there, and so it's small enough that, which also was an attraction to me, because it frees me up. I only have to be there kind of 2 long days a week, and that frees me up to be able to to play and then go do gigs and sessions and that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's exciting times over there, and they're doing really well. I'm really proud of my guys. They worked really, really hard, Sure have. Cool. Yeah.
What you got going on for the summer? When school is out, what do you do?
Well, so I'll be playing a musical for Studio 10. They're doing Mamma Mia, and that starts in August, and just gigs and sessions in July. I'm gonna try to take a vacation with the family, trying to work that out now, trying to figure out where we're going to go, and probably the end of May, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we have a few more weeks of school, and and then try to figure that out. I have an oldest one is in college, so he finishes up beginning of May, but my youngest one doesn't get. He's in 8th grade, so he'll finish up toward the end of May, and we'll try to thinking about maybe Wyoming or Colorado.
Oh yeah. The Wild Wild West.
Yeah. Yep.
So tell me, what you think about that Van Morrison gig?
It was a lot of fun. It's always pleasure playing with you and all the guys and in the band. The band was fantastic band, and so it was. We did a Van Morrison experience gig.
Yes. At the City Winery here in Nashville a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And since that time, man, I have become a huge Van Morrison fan.
Yeah,
I can't give enough of him.
The stuff is really deep. It's a lot of those songs I have been playing, for 20, 30 years, and
really?
Well, yeah, if you're doing, just gigs, but I really didn't until I really started listening to it, and because we pretty much grabbed most of the guitar parts and stuff from the record, and so unless you really listen that close, you didn't realize how deep and stuff that's going on.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And it actually is pretty deep.
I've been listening intently and discovering like all sorts of stuff, and then I was reading the book Astral Weeks, and there's a great thing on when you buy a Van Morrison album on iTunes, there's usually a history of that recording accompanying that, So, you're just reading about that. And on YouTube, reading about, this was a very difficult record to make, blah, blah, blah. They were holed up in France. Yeah, being holed up in France can be like really hard.
Yeah,
and, that sort of stuff. So it's been interesting. Yeah, it's been great. I had a great time. Yeah, I had a great time.
Me too. You played great, man.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. All you guys were great. It was really fantastic.
Yeah.
And,
have you known Jon for a long time, painter?
Couple of years now.
Oh, really? I know, because you were in the CCM world for so long, and I know he comes from that too, right? Him and his wife.
Yeah, he's been around a while.
Yeah,
but I met him through Jimmy Abeg.
Okay, yeah. He had gave me a call to play Godspell over where he teaches over in Lipscomb.
Godspell twice,
and you didn't do it.
He fired me twice.
He fired you.
Well, that's the joke.
I know that ain't true.
He said, "Man, can you do Godspell?" And I went, "Sure." So he sends me the charts, and I printed out all 53 pages.
Yeah, it was a book. A lot of reading.
And it's like, as soon as the printer stopped, he calls me. He goes, the director already has a drummer that she says has done Godspell many, many times. And so we're going to use him. I went, okay.
Man.
And then he calls me back like 3 or 4 days later and goes, the drummer got a gig.
Oh yeah, I think that was Danny. Yep.
Are you still interested? I said, sure. Yeah. And then he calls me back like the next day and goes, we got this other guy. He's done like Godspell a lot.
Okay.
And right now it just make rehearsals go better, easier, faster. And I said, okay, Jon, you can't call me for this again. This is it.
It's over now.
This is it.
I was in, I was out. I was in, I was out.
I'm taking this music right now and I'm putting it in the trash. I'm done.
Yeah.
But it was that one tune I think I saved.
In 7.
Excuse me. Alas for You.
Yeah, that was not easy.
Woo.
Yeah, that was odd meter going on, and
it's pretty fast too.
It is.
Like
it's
188.
188. Yeah. You gotta pay attention. And then the phrase changes halfway through it, and which you have to pay attention. I played Susical, and that's the same kind of thing. If you're not paying attention, you can get in trouble really quick. You need to be watching all the time, and that's one of those tunes that do that, because you kind of get the phrase in your ear, and then the phrase just changes slightly.
Right. And you're off to the races.
Yes, exactly. And everybody's looking at you.
Yeah, I kept. This is the only one I kept.
Yeah,
because when I first looked at it, I went, "Oh my goodness!"
Yeah, that's a rocking tune, man. Yeah.
Then I listened to it on YouTube, and
yeah.
Better start with this one.
Yes, exactly right. I think I did something similar. Yeah.
Start with the most.
Yeah, it was heavy guitar. Yeah, and then we played it again for just recently. We played, and I called Jon for that because my son's school played it. And so,
really?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
They did Godspell?
They did, yeah.
Well, hey, man. There's that music.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you for coming over. Thank you for telling us your story.
Yeah.
And I look forward to hanging out and playing some more with you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Always a pleasure, man.
All right. Thanks, bro.
Thank you, man.
See ya.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear from Eclectica Studios. I'm a full-time mixing and recording engineer. I work with Grammy winners, labels, and indie artists, using state-of-the-art digital mixing and restoration tools and the very best in analog gear. Really, though, it's my ability to bring tracks to life and fulfill your vision for your music. This has made me sought after by producers and artists worldwide. So spend your time working on music and not chasing a mix down a rabbit hole. Go to timdolbear.com and check out our free one-song mix offer.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.